The entire hospital lobby went silent when the arrogant CEO pointed at the black nurse and screamed, "You don't touch my child. People like you should be cleaning floors, not saving lives. Get out of my way. I want someone educated, someone competent." Everyone watched in shock as he humiliated her, loudly, brutally, mercilessly. But what he didn't know was, she was the only person who could save his dying son in the next 10 seconds. Before we continue, comment below which country are you watching from? And if you enjoy powerful, life-changing stories like this, please subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's begin.
The moment that broke the hospital and changed 2 lives forever. The automatic hospital doors slid open with a sharp hiss as Richard Hale, one of the most feared CEOs in the country, stormed inside. His designer shoes pounded against the marble floor, echoing through the lobby like thunder. His white shirt sleeves were rolled up, his tie loosened, and in his trembling arms lay his 7-year-old son, Ethan, barely conscious, lips pale, chest rising in weak, shallow gasps. "Somebody help!" Richard roared, his voice slicing through the noise. "My son can't breathe. I need a doctor, now!" Nurses glanced up from their stations, startled. Patients sitting in wheelchairs turned toward him. A few people instinctively stepped aside, sensing the panic and the power. But amidst the chaos, one nurse walked toward him with calm, steady steps. Nora Williams, a black nurse in her early 40s, wearing navy scrubs and carrying a clipboard, approached with gentle urgency. "Sir, I'm here. Let me take a look," she said, softly, reaching out toward Ethan. But she never got the chance. Richard jerked backward as if she were poison. His voice exploded across the entire lobby. "No! Don't touch him!" Everyone stopped. A ripple of silence swept across the room. Nora blinked, confused, lowering her hand. "Sir, I'm a nurse. I can help." But Richard's face twisted with fury and entitlement. "Help? You?" he spat. His voice rose louder, loud enough for the entire floor to hear. "People like you should be cleaning floors, not touching my child." Gasps erupted from the waiting area. A mother pulled her daughter close. A security guard stiffened but didn't move. Nora froze, not because she was weak, but because she'd heard insults like that before, just never screamed in her face in front of an entire hospital. Still, she stood straight, hands folded, eyes calm, yet wounded. "Sir, this is a medical emergency. Ethan is struggling to breathe. I need to assess." But she cut her off with another brutal verbal blow. "Get out of my way. I want someone qualified, someone educated, not—" He stopped, only to point directly at her badge. "Not you." His cruelty was sharp enough to slice through steel. A young intern whispered to a colleague, "Isn't that Nurse Nora? She's one of the best." But Richard wasn't listening. His anger, fear, and prejudice had fused into one poisonous outburst. "Where is the doctor?" he screamed again. "This is a private hospital. I'm paying for real professionals, not—" Nora flinched at his tone, but kept her voice steady. "Sir, every second counts. His breathing is deteriorating, his pulse—" "Don't talk to me," Richard yelled, stepping closer until he was inches from her face. "If anything happens to my son, I'll sue this entire place, and you will be the first person fired. Do you understand me?" His spit hit the floor. Even some doctors paused in the hallway, staring. Nora's heart tightened, not from fear of losing her job, but from the quiet ache of being judged not for her skill, but for her skin. She swallowed slowly. "Sir, please let me help your son." But Richard didn't budge. Instead, he turned to the reception counter, shouting, I want the head doctor, not some charity case nurse." The humiliation was complete. Nora felt the sting, but she didn't show it, because at that exact moment, Ethan's tiny body jerked. His head fell back. His lips turned bluish. His chest stopped moving. A horrifying choking sound escaped him before silence took over. Richard's face drained of color. "Ethan! Ethan, no! No, breathe, son, breathe, please!" He shook the boy, panicked, terrified. But Ethan was limp, frighteningly limp. A woman in the waiting room screamed. Someone dropped their coffee. Another person covered their mouth, whispering, "Oh my God!" And in seconds, the hospital lobby descended into shock. A doctor rushed toward them, but was still across the hall. A medical cart wasn't even nearby. And Richard, powerful, wealthy, influential Richard, looked desperately around like a man drowning. "Help him! Somebody help my son! He's not breathing, please!" His voice cracked, the voice of a father, not a CEO. But the doctor was too far. The equipment was too far. Every second was critical. And the closest, most capable, most trained medical professional was the same nurse he just humiliated. Nora stepped forward instantly. No hesitation, no spite, no ego. Her eyes locked onto Ethan's still face, and in that split second, every insult, every wound, every humiliation disappeared from her mind. All she saw was a child dying. She moved with lightning precision. "Step aside," Nora said, firm yet controlled. Richard blinked, stunned. "What?" Nora's voice dropped to a tone she only used in life or death emergencies. "Move right now." For the first time, Richard didn't argue. Terror replaced his arrogance. He stepped back slowly, helplessly, watching the nurse he insulted kneel beside his dying son. And the entire hospital watched, silent, breathless, because they all knew if this woman didn't act, Ethan wouldn't survive the next 10 seconds.
The moment a nurse became a hero, and a father finally saw the truth. Nora dropped to her knees beside Ethan with the calm intensity of someone who had done this 1,000 times. Her hands didn't tremble. Her breathing didn't break. The insult she suffered only minutes ago disappeared because a child was dying, and that was all that mattered. "Pulse is crashing, airway compromised," she murmured under her breath, already in assessment mode. Ethan's tiny chest was still. His lips were blue, his eyes were half open but lifeless. A suffocating silence filled the lobby as the crowd circled around, unable to look away. Richard knelt a few feet behind her, hands shaking violently. He's not breathing. He's not... Please, someone!" His voice cracked, disintegrating into helpless panic. Nora didn't look back. She didn't answer him. She went straight into action. She tilted Ethan's head gently, using one hand to open the airway. "Come on, sweetheart. Stay with me," she whispered. But there was no response. No gasp. No movement. Nothing. Her trained fingers moved along his throat and chest. "Obstruction," she said sharply. A young intern watching gasped. "How did she know so fast?" "Because she's Nora," another whispered. "One of the best emergency-trained nurses we ever had." But Richard didn't hear any of that. He was too busy fighting tears. "Hurry, please, do something," he begged. Nora was already doing something. She tilted Ethan's head again, pressed 2 fingers under his jawline and confirmed it. Something was blocking his airway. Something small, but deadly. If she waited for equipment, Ethan would die. She didn't wait. With lightning precision, she slipped her gloved fingers into his mouth and swept deep toward his throat. It was a risky maneuver, something many nurses hesitate to do without tools. But Nora was different. She pulled out a small piece of candy, half melted and sticky,
A wave of gasps moved through the crowd. But Ethan was still not breathing. Richard collapsed on the floor. Oh God, please no. Ethan, wake up. Nora didn't stop. She placed her mouth over Ethan's and began rescue breathing. 2 deep breaths, perfectly timed. Nothing. She repositioned his head. Another 2 breaths. Still nothing. A trembling paramedic whispered from the side, "She's doing everything right. Why isn't he breathing?" Because this moment, this terror, was something Nora knew too well. The image flashed in her mind, her younger brother, Malik, lying in her lap years ago, struggling to breathe from an asthma attack. They waited for help. They waited too long. He slipped away in her arms. That night broke her and built her. She had sworn, never again. No child will die in front of me, not ever. Her jaw tightened, her eyes sharpened. She leaned down and spoke firmly into Ethan's ear. "Come back. Listen to me, sweetheart. You're not going anywhere." She sealed her mouth against his and gave a strong breath. Then another. Suddenly, Ethan's chest twitched. Richard gasped. Did he just... Nora ignored him and pressed her fingers to Ethan's neck. A faint pulse. Weak, but there. "Come on," she breathed. "One more." She gave another breath, directing air with perfect technique. Ethan's body jolted. Then, a soft, choking cough escaped him. The sound ripped through the lobby like a miracle. Richard fell backward against the wall, sobbing uncontrollably. Oh God, please no. Ethan, wake up." Ethan's eyes fluttered. He was dazed, confused, breathing in tiny, shaky gasps. "He's back," Nora confirmed, her voice steady but her heart pounding. Doctors rushed in now, finally reaching the scene with equipment. "BP low. Get him on the stretcher, quick. Start oxygen, quick." But the doctors, those same qualified, educated professionals Richard demanded, paused just a moment to stare at Nora in awe. One whispered, "Nora just performed a blind finger sweep and advanced rescue breaths flawlessly. That procedure saves maybe 1 in 20 if done without tools." Another shook his head. "She just saved that boy's life." The lead doctor placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Good work, Nurse Williams. Outstanding work." But Nora just sat back on her knees, breathing quietly. Her hands were shaking now, not during the emergency, but after. Because once the crisis ends, the emotions hit. Richard crawled toward her on the floor, not walking, not standing, crawling, like a man whose pride had been shattered. He couldn't speak. For the first time in years, words refused to leave his mouth. He simply watched, as the same black nurse he had called incompetent, the same woman he humiliated in front of dozens, had just saved the most precious person in his life without thinking twice. As Ethan was wheeled away toward ICU, Nora whispered, "He'll make it." Richard's tears fell freely. She stood up slowly. He looked up at her like a broken man. This was the moment he realized. The person he insulted was the only reason his son was alive.
Behind every outburst lies a wound no one sees. The ICU hallway smelled of antiseptic and fear. Machines hummed softly behind the glass as Ethan, now stabilized, lay surrounded by blinking monitors. A thin oxygen tube rested under his nose, helping each small breath. Richard stood outside the room, leaning against the cold wall, his expensive suit wrinkled, hands trembling. His face, usually proud, composed, feared in every boardroom, was now pale and hollow. He looked nothing like a CEO. He looked exactly like what he was. a father who almost lost his child. Every few seconds he glanced through the glass to make sure Ethan's chest was still rising. His eyes were red, swollen, empty. A nurse walked by, intentionally avoiding him, the memory of his shouting still fresh. A doctor brushed past without making eye contact, holding back judgment. But the worst part was the silence. Because in silence, Richard heard his conscience, and every word he screamed at Nora played back like a knife twisting in his chest. People like you should be cleaning floors. Not someone like you. I want someone educated, competent. He squeezed his eyes shut, ashamed, disgusted with himself. For years, he believed nurses were beneath him. For years, he carried a hatred so deeply rooted, he didn't even see the cruelty anymore. Until now. He swallowed hard, because he finally remembered where the hatred started, a memory he never escaped. It was years ago, in a dimly lit hospital ward, a woman screaming in pain, the smell of blood, the sound of alarms. His wife, Emma, in the middle of childbirth. Richard stood helpless beside her as nurses swarmed, shouting orders. One nurse, young, inexperienced, panicked, ignored a crucial sign. She dismissed Emma's complaint. She didn't call the doctor in time. She didn't recognize the internal bleeding. By the time they realized what was happening, Emma was gone. Richard held their newborn baby with one hand and Emma's cold, lifeless fingers with the other. The image burned itself into his soul, and in that single night, a seed of hatred planted itself inside him. He never healed. He never talked to anyone. He never let himself grieve. So he aimed the hatred outward, towards nurses. All nurses. Every nurse. He believed avoiding them would protect Ethan. But today that hatred almost killed the only person left from Emma. His eyes blurred again. He whispered into his hands, "I'm so sorry, Emma. I almost failed him." Meanwhile, in the staff room, Nora sat on a metal chair, sipping room-temperature water with shaky hands. Her uniform was still damp from Ethan's rescue. Her gloves had left faint marks on her wrists. Her hair was messy, her breathing uneven. But her eyes were distant. Her colleague, Maya, sat beside her. "You okay?" Nora forced a half-smile. "I'm fine." Maya shook her head. "No, you're not. What he said to you, that wasn't okay." Nora sighed. "It's not the first time I've heard words like that." Maya bit her lip. "But he screamed at you in front of everyone." Nora looked down at her hands. "People judge what they see, not what they don't." Maya frowned. "What do you mean?" Nora stared at the floor. "They didn't see my brother suffer because a nurse ignored him. They didn't see how helpless I felt watching him die while waiting for help. They don't know why I became a nurse. They don't know I promised myself never to let another child die from slow care." Maya touched her shoulder. "You saved that boy, Nora. You were incredible." But Nora didn't smile. Instead, she whispered, "I don't save children for thanks. I do it because I couldn't save him." Her voice cracked. "And sometimes it feels like no matter how many lives I save, people will only see my skin, not my skill." She blinked away tears before they could fall. Back in the hallway, Richard saw a group of doctors discussing Ethan's charts. One said quietly, "If Nurse Nora hadn't intervened when she did, that boy wouldn't have made it." Another added,
She was once in the top 1% of medical interns, could have become a surgeon, but she left the track after a personal tragedy. Richard's head shot up. Top 1%? Surgeon track? This was the woman he called uneducated. This was the woman he told to mop floors. He felt sick, literally sick. His knees weakened. He lowered himself into a chair, burying his face in his hands. For the first time he realized, the person he hated the most just saved the person he loved the most. And he owed her more than an apology.
When pride meets truth, only humility can survive. The hospital hallway was quieter now, but tension still hung in the air like thick fog. Monitors beeped softly from inside ICU. Nurses moved with cautious professionalism. Doctors whispered in corners, and visitors peeked through doors, curious but wary. Richard Hale, usually confident and commanding, now hovered outside Ethan's room, his hands shaking. Every second without his son's cries felt like a lifetime. Every echo of his own insults replayed in his mind like a hammer against his chest. He had to do something. He had to face the nurse, the woman whose skill had just pulled his child back from death. Taking a deep breath, he walked toward Nora, who was gathering her supplies in the staff room. Her posture was straight, eyes forward, a professional mask firmly in place. Not a trace of his earlier humiliation cracked her composure. He cleared his throat, unsure how to begin. "Nora, His voice faltered. She turned slowly to face him. Her gaze was steady, unyielding. "You humiliated me." "No," she replied calmly. "You humiliated yourself." The words hit him harder than any scream he had ever shouted. He felt smaller than ever. I didn't mean..." "You didn't mean it," Nora interrupted gently. "Sir, it doesn't matter if you meant it or not. You judged me before you saw me act. You assumed incompetence because of my skin. You judged me publicly, loudly, brutally. That's on you, not me." Richard looked down, ashamed. I'm sorry. Truly, I never should have..." "You don't have to respect me," Nora said, softening slightly. "But don't disrespect the uniform that saves lives. That's what matters." Her words sank deep. They were a mirror, reflecting not just her strength but the truth he had ignored for years. For the first time, Richard realized that his money, his power, his anger, none of it could save his son. Only her skill and courage could. He swallowed hard. I owe you more than an apology. You saved my son, my only son. I don't even know how to thank you." Nora's face softened but remained serious. "I don't need thanks. I needed him alive. That's enough." Richard looked at her, suddenly aware of everything else. Her tired eyes, the small dark circles under them, her worn scrubs, the faint bruises from countless shifts. He realized that she lived a life far from the luxury he took for granted. She didn't work for money. She worked for purpose. "I want to do something," he said slowly. "Anything. I'll fund programs, hospitals, anything for nurses. You..." He paused, voice trembling. "You deserve recognition." Nora shook her head slightly. "Recognition doesn't change the everyday reality. The prejudice, the judgment, the disrespect, it's constant. I saved your son today, yes, but tomorrow I'll be back on the floor facing the same assumptions. I cannot stay where I am. Not anymore." Richard's heart sank. "Wait. What?" "She resigned.
she said simply, gathering her bag. "I cannot work somewhere that values titles over skill, appearances over life, and forgets dignity." Richard watched, powerless, as the woman who saved his son, who humiliated him by showing him his own arrogance, walked past him, leaving the hospital quietly. No dramatics, no speeches, just silent strength. He realized humility doesn't roar, it walks away. And in that moment, Richard knew he had been given a second chance, not just at life, but at becoming a better human being.
Richard Hale searched everywhere, every hospital, every clinic he could think of, but Nora was nowhere to be found. The woman who had saved his son, the one who shattered his arrogance and pride, had vanished from the system he controlled so perfectly. Days passed. Richard couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the words she had spoken. "Don't disrespect the uniform that saves lives." Those words echoed in his mind, louder than any boardroom victory. He realized that saving lives required courage, skill, and heart, not money, not power, not influence. Then, one afternoon, a tip reached him. Nora was volunteering at a small community clinic in a poor neighborhood, far from the hospital, far from recognition, far from the judgments she had endured. He arrived quietly, almost afraid to approach her. Inside the tiny clinic, he saw her kneeling beside a small boy, performing the same precise emergency care she had used on Ethan. Her hands were calm, her focus unwavering, and for a moment, Richard felt awe, guilt, and humility crash over him all at once. Tears welled up in his eyes. He walked slowly toward her. "Nora," he whispered. She looked up, surprised, but didn't stand. I owe you everything," he said, voice breaking. "Not just for saving Ethan, but for showing me what real courage, skill, and humanity look like." Nora's eyes softened, but her voice remained strong. "Sir, you don't owe me anything. You just need to remember, life isn't measured by money or titles. It's measured by the lives you touch, the love you show, and the compassion you give." Richard nodded, overwhelmed. "I want to help. Whatever you need, I'll make it happen. This clinic, your work, it deserves to be supported. Let me sponsor it. Let me honor your efforts." A small, humble smile appeared on Nora's face. "Thank you. That's all I've ever wanted. To save lives, to make a difference. Nothing else matters." Richard kept his promise. He poured resources into the clinic, created scholarships for young nurses, and established the Nora Williams Pediatric Trust, ensuring children everywhere would have access to care. Yet the most important lesson he learned could not be bought. Respect, compassion, and humility can save more lives than money ever will. Months later, Ethan ran into the clinic, holding a bouquet of flowers. He hugged Nora tightly, calling her his guardian angel. Richard stood nearby, silently grateful, and forever changed. The story ends with one simple truth. Power and wealth may open doors, but courage, skill, and heart save lives. And sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones we least expect. If this story touched your heart or gave you goosebumps, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And tell us in the comments, which country are you watching from? Support the channel to hear more real-life stories of courage, resilience, and life-changing lessons. And remember, compassion and courage cost nothing, but they can change everything.